Hello everyone. My name is Elise. Welcome to my channel. We are in the exact same location as my previous video, my TBR, because I filmed that 2 seconds ago. So round two, same location, same outfit. Here we go again. If you hear my dog snoring in the background, it's because he's sleeping right below me and he loves to snore. So we're just gonna enjoy that as a little white noise in the background. So I'm gonna be going over my June wrap up today. I read 7 books in the month of June. There were a couple DNFs in there. I don't talk about DNFs on my channel unless they're in a specified video that has a specified TBR, and then you get to see what I DNF. There may or may not be one of those videos coming up, but otherwise I don't talk about them if I DNF them. So there was other reading in this month, but nothing that got finished other than these 7. I do also have, I've just realized this trend in my reading that I read less in the summertime. I think it's because I'm busier in the summertime. If you don't know, I live in Seattle, which maybe is obvious by this print in the back. And summertime is basically when like everyone goes out to do all these activities that you can't typically do in the winter. So yeah, we're just doing all the weddings and baby showers and birthdays and blah blah blah. Everything just feels like it comes up in the summer. So less reading is being done, but we still got to these 7 books that I think are a pretty good selection. So we'll go ahead and get into it. Per usual, I go over my wrap-ups in the order that I read them. That's how I always do it. I will say a few of these are going to be coming out in dedicated videos, so I won't talk about them that much because there will be another video where I go into more depth. But let's dive in. Oh, and one more thing to note is I read a ton of nonfiction this month. I think 4 of these books were nonfiction and 3 were fiction. So here we go. We're on a nonfiction journey, I guess. I didn't mean to do that, but it just happened. All right. So first book I read this month was Wrong Place, Wrong Time by Gillian McAllister. This is published by William Morrow, and this is coming out in a video very soon on books that my mother-in-law has sent me. So I won't go into great length about it here, but I very much enjoyed this. I thought it was such a fun thriller. Well, is it a thriller? It's kind of like a surrealist mystery suspense type of vibe. I don't read a ton of thrillers, but I don't know if this would count traditionally towards that, but it's definitely in that vein. And this is about a woman who sees her son stab someone one night, and then she falls asleep and wakes up at the beginning of that day, and then starts progressively going back in time. It's not always one day at a time. Sometimes it skips like months or years, and she is basically trying to figure out how her son got to this point and stop this butterfly effect from happening. So that's the premise. I think it was very well written. It's very pacey and page turnery. You definitely want to figure out what's happening. And I think the framing of this is so brilliant as an author because you can put the main character in any day you want based on the premise. So you don't have to worry about like, is this believable or is this not? You're already suspending your disbelief because you know that the rules of this time travel mean that they can show up on any day. So I just thought that was brilliant for a thriller when believability, at least for me, really matters to get myself into the story. And I loved it for that. Definitely deserves all the praise that it gets, in my opinion. And it has a lot to do with how important relationships are in your life, and I really enjoyed that. And there's lots of complicated relationships in here. So that is Wrong Place, Wrong Time. Check out that video later in the month if you want to know more. Next up, we have a book that I read for work with some of my colleagues, and that is Ejaculate Responsibly, A Whole New Way to Think About Abortion by Gabrielle Blair. And this is published by Workman. It's a very short book, and it is kind of exactly what it says on the cover. This is one big argument. Well, actually, I should say it's like 30 arguments. I think it's split up into 30 arguments. Is that the amount that it is? Let me just double check. There's 28 arguments in here. So each chapter is a different argument, and it's an argument in totality trying to get people to understand that abortion is a men's issue. I think that overall, I think this was done very well. The notes section is extensive. There's a lot of research that went into this. In some ways, this is a great introduction if you're maybe new to diving in about abortion rights and abortion in general. I do think it's a great introduction. So most of the things were already on my radar a little bit, but there were a couple arguments that I think they made that were very interesting, particularly around pregnancy and contraception, that were slightly different from the rhetoric that I hear in other places about abortion. So yeah, I thought this was really good. I don't agree with everything in here. Some things I think were extrapolating data and a little bit of a stretch, but overall I thought this was fantastic and would highly recommend, and it made for a very interesting discussion at my work. So that is Ejaculate Responsibly. Next up, we have another book from the Books My Mother-in-Law Sent Me blog, and that is The Last to Vanish by Miranda. This is published by Mary Sue Rucci Books, which is an imprint of Scribner, I think, and this is a very traditional thriller. I talk about this a little bit in that vlog in more depth, but I'll say here that I think Miranda is a very standard, reliable thriller writer. She always writes about small town settings, and this one is very much the same. It's a small town setting in a mountain town. It's right off a portion of the Appalachian Trail, so there's a lot of hikers going through, and that's really the main part of tourism there. Except that there has been multiple vanishings in this town in particular, I think 5 in total, and people have now started coming to be like tourists over the vanishings, and it's developed this type of lore around it. Our main character works at an inn within that community, and the latest vanishing was a journalist who was there to investigate the previous disappearances and then disappeared themselves, and they were staying at the inn. So our main character kind of gets swept up into the investigation, and we go from there. I won't give you any more. I think this, yeah, again, is like very standard, very reliable, and I mean that in the best of ways. So again, if you want to know more, check out that video. All right. Next up, we have another nonfiction, and that is Happening by Annie Ernaux. This is translated from the French by Tanya Leslie, and it's published by 7 Stories Press. This is very popular at the moment because Annie Ernaux won the Nobel Prize last year, so lots of people have been picking her up since. She mainly writes nonfiction, and this is narrative nonfiction about her trying to get an abortion in France back when it was illegal still. I want to say it was in the 70s. Is that when this takes place? Let me look. Maybe I don't know. Maybe I don't know. Maybe it's earlier than that. Can't remember the year, but it was legal to get an abortion. She's trying to get an abortion, and it's just about her journey going through that process. I will say in the beginning, I was sort of like, okay, maybe I don't get the hype with the writing style. It's very sparse, direct, kind of bare bones, which I don't dislike. It just didn't wow me in any way. But as we went further on into the story, I really got sucked in and drawn in, and just like the importance of this resonated so strongly, and the things that she chose to put into the book I think were such important choices that she was making, and it felt very deliberate, and I really became entranced at that point and was like, I get it. I agree, this is a 5-star read for me. It's so fantastic. Definitely hard to read, so there's trigger warnings obviously, but I think it's well worth it, and such an important experience then and now, and who knows how long. So that is Happening by Annie Ernaux. Loved it, would highly recommend. Next up, we have my next iteration in the Sherlock Holmes kind of project that I've been doing this year. And this is The Adventures of Sherlock Holmes by Arthur Conan Doyle, and this is published by Headline, this specific edition. This is the third book in the Sherlock Holmes series that I've read so far this year. I'm reading them in publication order, and this is the first short story collection that I got to. This is also a reread for me. So again, I have a whole dedicated vlog on this, so go to that if you would like to hear more thoughts. There's also a lot of fun B-roll footage in there, at least fun for me, but yeah, so go to there if you want more thoughts. But I think the short story collections are a great way to get an introduction to Sherlock Holmes, because you get all of the typical fun tropiness of Sherlock Holmes and Watson, but without some of the longer, more boring passages that can pop up in the novels, in my opinion. And you also get the added benefit of there's just less racism in these. I don't know if that has to do with the short form and that's why there's less racism, but there is, and that's nice to have to experience it less often and have it be less integrated into the overall storyline. So I definitely recommend the short stories, and this would be a great one to start off with if you've never read Sherlock Holmes before and are interested, because you could just try one and then be done with it if you don't like it. But yeah, lots of clever plotting in this, and it was just a joy to read. So that is The Adventures of Sherlock Holmes. All right, next up we have a new book that I just hauled. I think it was, I read it in like the last 2 days of the month, or the second to last day of the month, whatever it was. But that is Who Killed My Father? This is by Edouard Louis, and it is translated from the French by Lorin, Stein, and it's published by New Directions. It is so little, I don't know, like you can see my hand, like my hand is like basically the size of it. I love this cover, and this is also nonfiction. It is about, it's kind of like Edouard Louis' memoir centering his father. He's basically making an argument that lots of people are complicit in his father's death and failing health, mainly the government and the classist society in France. And basically, if you're poor, then the government does not care about you and will not protect you in any way. And all of the ways that these decisions that people make in government that really have no effects on them personally, but have life and death stakes for people who are living in poverty. And it was so brilliant. This was another 5-star read for me this month. I absolutely loved it. It's very piecemeal, so it's not one linear narrative. It goes back and forth, and some things are cyclical, but it's very short, and so that doesn't get monotonous in any way. And it shows a lot of the like real raw, I know everyone says that about nonfiction, but it really felt raw, like pain of the men in this family and the ways that toxic masculinity has destroyed them. And there's also a lot of compassion for him to his father about why he is the way that he is. And it's just, it just really hit me deeply, and it's so nuanced, and I loved it. So I highly recommend, if that sounds interesting to you. That is Who Killed My Father. And lastly, the final book that I finished this month, I'm so proud of. Can you hear the little snores? Oh my God. I'm so proud of, because I have technically been reading this book for like 2 years. So I finally finished it. And that is Our Prisons Obsolete by Angela Davis. This is also published by 7 Stories Press. And this is a very small nonfiction, again, about prison abolitionists and the prison system as a whole. I started this in 2021 and got halfway through and then just sort of abandoned it. I'm not sure why, but I really wanted to get back to it last year and I didn't do it. And I was like, maybe I should just get rid of the book. Like, I'm not going back to it. I came back to it and I really enjoyed it. I'm very glad I finished it. I will say the one negative about this is it is very dense. It's very dense. So know that going in. Luckily it's not long, but it takes on so many different perspectives about the prison system and why abolition is for Angela Davis the correct answer to the prison system. Not that we need to reform the prison system, but that we need to get rid of it altogether. And she's sort of making that argument by first talking about the history of the prison system, mainly in the US, but she does talk about other countries as well, and how we got to this point, right? The US has a huge number of the global prisoners. It's very disproportionate to the population that we have, and how our prison system is starting to get replicated in other countries and how problematic that is, and the ways that this for-profit prison system is really abusive and is not actually interested in any type of reformation for people that are sent to them. It's mostly about trying to churn out the highest profit. And yeah, she makes excellent argument. This has a huge notes section. There's a lot of research involved. And even though this came out a while ago, it's still very relevant. This came out in 2003 and it's still very relevant. So I really enjoyed this, would highly recommend reading this for everyone really, but especially if you live in the US. So that is our Prisons Obsolete. And those are the 7 books that I read in the month of June. I hope you found some stuff that you're interested in reading. Please let me know if you did. And also let me know what you read in the month of June. I always want more recommendations. And I will see you all in a video very soon. Bye.